Okay, guys, I'm back. I think this is part 30 of my midpoint update for the 2020 decade. Since my briefings have lasted this long, I have a special Christmas edition that I hope you find very interesting and informative about the possible birth date of the Lord. This gives us possible information I was realizing as I studied it myself, as I heard information about it recently, about possibly knowing when the Lord was born. I think a lot of people don't try to find these dates and be really specific about it or make a big deal about it because it's very holy, very precious topic, just to appreciate what the Lord has done for us, that He came, the most amazing and miraculous and wonderful thing that's ever happened on the earth. People still celebrate it every year, even if it's not necessarily at the right time, so it possibly does give more information about the timelines that we have been talking about, of possibly pointing to when the tribulation may begin or other prophetic events. So one of the questions here is, does the Revelation 12 sign point to Jesus' birth actually being on September the 11th and a future time of the start of the tribulation? I'll try to keep these ideas short, so if anything interests you here, feel free to search into it further. And there's probably a lot more information out there. Of course, September 11 is very interesting to me because I was believing in starting to talk about on the internet that September the 11th of the events of New York in 2001 were probably a big start of the end time prophetic events, if not the first seal opening. Other people have picked up that something very big and important and worldwide happened there, and to various degrees. For example, Marfugel News picked up that whenever the recent virus events happened to the whole world, he kept saying this is like the feel of the worldwide shift, a deliberate planned event just like those events back in New York. I was talking about these ideas since 2017, and the patterns had shown me, if you've been following my work, the patterns had shown me that by the end of 2019 I was looking for a really big event to come to the world. I said it was going to be 2020 or 2021, and it was going to start to shift the economies of the world toward the cashless system. So I was saying that back in 2019. So you guys see what has happened since then. That's why I'm giving this 2020 decade update, is to discuss, are we going into the black horse of the cashless? Was September 11 the beginning? Was that like a white horse event? Or was it a reflection of it, or a shadow, or a foreshadowing? And the decade after that, could that have been like the red horse of peace taken from the earth for various reasons? And I will not get into all those details. There's a lot of that discussion on my channel already if you're interested. So yes, I was looking at September 11 very closely, but I wasn't hyper focused or obsessed on it. And then I had a horrific attack in the spirit from someone who was stalking my channel and halfway mocking me and halfway cursing me all the way through 2020 that I mostly ignored. He came to my area for special church services that I refused to go to, and it's a long story, but he got into a rage more and more as the events that I believe the Lord showed me started happening in the world. And he was not able to shut my channel down and my book down, and he was enraged at me and cursing me. Very long, detailed story. Some of it's on this channel. And he was like the doorway that the curses came through, in which I received a pretty violent, years-long cursing event that began on September the 11th. That's when I first felt everything was opening and hitting me and hurting me. And it got worse for a while until we did warfare against it. And I have come to believe that these events will culminate in a 7-year cycle, and they will be part of the sign of what's going on in these times. That everything that I was saying would happen, it started, I started being attacked on September the 11th of 2020 because I was saying that all of the virus release and many things related to it was looking like a third seal of Revelation opening. So I believe these events will probably be confirmed at year 7 in a very powerful way. And I was already looking at the 3.5 point for the attack that happened on me in case something happened there. So at 3.5 years exactly, this evil preacher who was attacking and cursing me finally was showed up as supporting an evil church. And that's a really long story. I don't want to spend the whole video on that, just to let you guys know why. I have been looking at the significance of September 11. This is a time of the Western churches being super corrupt. I don't know about the other places on the earth, but the Western churches are so very corrupt. I believe that Micah 6 talks about this, and talks about the scales that are weighing out the things of the wicked houses that seem like it's talking about the temples that are supposed to be worshiping God. And it goes on to talk about rationings for oil and wine and wheat and barley. So I think Micah 6 is also a reflection talking about the third seal, and confirms the church corruptions everywhere, which is what we've been seeing, which the man who was attacking me was at one of these corrupt churches, celebrating with them and saying they could do no wrong. They have since gone bankrupt from all their lawsuits against them, and also they've been in legal trouble from harming children. And so, not to get into all of that either, as much as to say I have a lot of signs that have happened here with me that I think correlate to prophecy, prophetic times. We probably are at either the third seal or something that's meant to look like it, to warn us about it, a foreshadowing of it. And I have just went ahead and said it seems to me like the third seal has opened, and it's unmistakable. So if you want to study all that out, you can look at videos on my channel. But here I wanted to speak about, does the Revelation 12 sign point to Jesus' birth actually happened on September the 11th, and does that give us information about possible future dates of the tribulation starting? So people have looked back at the time and the possible times of Jesus' birth date, and they've looked into records of who was the king at the time, this Herod the Great, who had many children killed because he was warned by the wise men that there was a great king born in the land, and he got jealous and nervous, so he had all these children killed. And so people have looked at those records to try to find the exact dates, and they've come to times that are around 4 or 6 BC. And I'm going to go through several possible date lines in this discussion, and this is the first one. The theory goes, for people that are studying the events of creation and the flood and Abraham's days and Israel forming as a nation and King David and all the days and times and the temple being built by Solomon, they're looking at the theory that Jesus came to the earth at about the 4,000 year mark. There are the different verses that refer to Israel reviving and 2,000 years after the prophecies of Jesus were fulfilled on the earth. One of those is the first few verses of Hosea chapter 6, and it talks about after 2 days that he will revive us, the third day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. If you count 2,000 years since Jesus came on earth, you're looking at the 6,000 year mark, and this matches the idea that the creation of man and earth and how all of this will be prophesied to end is that the earth will be here for 7,000 years in this form, and the last 1,000 year will be the millennial reign of Christ as the Jubilee of the earth, or as the day of rest. And so if you're looking at 2,000 years after these events, that's how people are adding the math. If you look at Jesus being here around 4 or 6 BC as his birth, then very interestingly, when you add 2,000 years to that, that brings you to the year 2027, which I have discussed a lot on this channel. So here we have the year 2027 again, or it brings you to the time of 2029 for a possible end of a cycle, or the end of 6,000 years, or at least getting close, because we're going to look at some more dates. And I would say that's not when Jesus returns, but it could possibly be the beginning of a tribulation, and we don't really know, but it's good just to keep these things in mind, to know where our hopes need to be, where our prayers need to be, where our lifestyle needs to be. So now I would like to look at Revelation chapter 12, because you guys may know about the Revelation 12 sign that occurred September 23 of 2017. This was a known sign. I believe that was the beginning of Rosh Hashanah that year. But this was the first time, I think, ever in creation, according to the computer models, that The most perfect sign in the heavens of the Revelation 12 sign of Virgo, at least in like modern creation, like in these past thousands of years, that this sign would have lined up perfectly in our skies of the Virgin and the place for the sun, the moon, and the stars. That's the time that it was lining up in the way that was described in Revelation 12, the chapter 12. I made a big significance about this also because that would have been around year 7 of the second cycle that I was looking at. That could have been like the red horse. And people were saying, oh, it's rapture that date or tribulation that date, but nothing really seemed to happen. And they were like mocking it like rapture anxiety. But I believe this was one more sign that the Lord was giving us that we are in the last days. This is the end times. And we need to start looking up into the heavens, for the powers of heaven are starting to shake. We can see it more and more in the weather and different things, and the ways that the governments of the world are reacting to the weather by giving us wars and giving us, different planned events. And so, in order to understand where we are at in prophecy and what's going forward, we needed to start looking up at that time. That means that we're looking at our food supplies because of the strange weather, the differences and changes of the weather that will only escalate going forward. There are a lot of correlating signals and road signs along this way that have pointed to us that we are here. This is the return of the Lord. You probably, if you're listening to a channel like this, you probably already know. But this was the 7-year marker of that second cycle. And so that's why I'm wondering, there were some 7-year markers of the first cycle if you counted September the first time in 2001. And then I'm looking for a 7-year cycle. Since I was attacked in 2020 on 9/11, I'm looking for a 7-year cycle coming up. Not next September 11, but the one after that, or close to that time frame. And I have some videos about that on my channel if you want to check that out. So we're looking at the Revelation 12 sign from the book of Revelation, chapter 12 in the Bible. And very interestingly, it's referring to the birth of Christ and the different events of the Lord. I'm going to read through it here so you can see what I'm talking about. It's referring to the war that happens, the war that's always happened over the Lord and the truth and against evil, trying to stop it and hold everything back. So Revelation chapter 12, it says, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she being with child cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. And they overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth, and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So that is Revelation chapter 12. It's talking about the Lord being born, and you can see the different events and the time frames that are given there. And there's always a war and a fight, either against the Lord or against his people. It's a lot of warning there and a lot of reality there. Apparently every month in September, there is a version of this Virgo sign, which the signs are created by God. And they originally were giving the story of creation and the story of salvation and the redemption of creation from Christ, through Christ. And so whenever you talk about the signs, you have to be careful and explain that, because we're used to hearing it in a perverted way where people have used it to do how rich they're going to get and how much success they're going to have, and it has to do with astrology, and we were not supposed to look and study that, but these are the signs that God put into the sky, like he said in Genesis, for signs and seasons and signals. And so I don't even look at it very much at all, but when it does come up, I believe that I'm just doing a due diligence to look at it. And every September, it's showing this Virgo sign with the sun. The importance of 2017 is that the stars were aligned perfectly around her head, and the different ways, the sun at her feet, and it had not been like that before. Everyone does look at September because it does look like it's the Virgin with the sun. So people were asking about 3 BC, the year of 3 BC. September 11 of that year would have been on Tishri 1, and I think there's more significance to September 11 if you want to look into that. But here people were looking because that was that first month, the first day of the month Tishri 1, which I believe is the first day of the new year on the Hebrew calendar. And they have a slightly different calendar of 360 days, I believe, still, and ours is like 365 and a half, so you have to calculate that also if you look at these things. So it probably only gives you so much information. So Tishri 1 fell on September the 11th of that year, and this was traditionally the day that Adam was created. This is the birth month of the kings, per tradition. It is the month for coronating the king. Supposedly a lot of kings down through Hebrew history were always coronated on Tishri 1. And this is the beginning of the Rosh Hashanah observance. And there's like a traditional theory that this is the month of the King of Kings, because it is the month of the kings. And so the first of the year on 3 BC is September the 11th. A lot of people say that is the true birth date of Christ. Around September or October would have also been the month that the shepherds would still be in their fields with sheep, and that was the original story given to us in the Gospels, that a lot of shepherds were out in the fields and they saw angels coming to celebrate the birth of Christ. And so pretty much everyone now says that December in the middle of winter was obviously not when Christ was born, just because of the clue of the shepherds. So if we're looking at his life being around 33 years, and him being possibly born in 3 BC, then that puts then that's giving us an idea that our tribulation or some kind of an end time event would begin around 2030. There is an author, his name is C.J. Lovick. I have not looked much into this. If you're interested, you can check it out. And he claims that he sees where the crucifixion was in April of 30 AD. And that would also put us to the year 2030 as something important. Possibly. NASA claims to have found an event in an eclipse that I guess they're announcing it because anyone can see it and look into it and find it. That occurred around the month Nisan 15 in April of 33 AD. That could have correlated with what is reported of the great earthquake and the darkness in the year that the Lord died. And that would give us an addition of 2,000 years to that would be looking at the year 2033. And I believe that 2033 would be a high watch year for prophetic events, possibly the following spring in 2034. If you add 7 years to that, we come to the year 2040. Like if that's the beginning of a tribulation, by then the cashless events would come to earth, and it's possible that the pale horse events could also begin with tribulation or be very close to the time of tribulation. And here I'm following the third, fourth, and fifth seals. The fourth seal is the pale horse events, and then the fifth seal is describing the martyrdoms of the tribulation. It doesn't necessarily mean one right after the other, as much as by the time you get into the fifth seal, you are in the tribulation, which may have begun at the third or fourth seal, is just my theory on it. So, there's also a scientist named Bob or Robert Wadsworth. He has 6 years of college in astrophysics and celestial mechanics, and he has some other history of studies. He believes that the stars of creation point to many important biblical events through time. He believes he has pinpointed through what the stars say. I believe he has a YouTube channel, Bob Wadsworth, and one of his videos may address this. But he believes he has been able to pinpoint a possible tribulation beginning September the 8th of 2040. And he said it may not necessarily happen that way. It's just that all the other things he studied of biblical events looks like that is pointing toward a tribulation event. So I wonder if 2040 is giving us the beginning of the end of tribulation. Like I said, 2033 may be important and 2040 may wrap it up and end it. It's also interesting because September 8th is so close to September the 11th. And apparently he has 4 DVDs explaining his theories. It's called A Voice Crying in the Heavens. It is supposed to be available at theprophecyclub.com under the resource tab. I could not find it, so you may can search A Voice Crying in the Heavens if you're interested in that, and more information on what he's looking at there. But I find that interesting because his September the 8th date is very close to September 11, just like some things happened this year on September the 10th, that I believe that was the 9/11 event of this year, the midway marker, and they were testing to see how divided people might be and doing some other things there, including rituals. And of course it sparked a lot of division, didn't it? These events of 9/10 of this year sparked a lot of division in the country as planned. And it's also interesting what he says about 2040, because this matches an original timeline that I had pointed out about the first seals possibly opening. So if the first seal possibly began in the 2000, the Y2K, and the 2001 9/11 event, and notice there's strong marker points that I was seeing at every 7-year point before I was even attacked in the spirit this way. I was seeing 7-year marker points. So the 2000 events could have been the white horse rolling out, the Antichrist spirit of going forth conquering and to conquer, and that started it. And if you follow the idea that these horsemen were preparing the entire world for the Antichrist rule and tribulation, the beginning of sorrows, not the tribulation actually beginning, and you cannot find any Bible verse saying that the horseman is the beginning of the tribulation. You cannot find that. That is a tradition and a neat little packaged idea that seems to really fit, but there's no biblical reference for that. So if you're looking at the second seal being that next decade, in 2011 decade, you had many events, but one of the biggest ones I saw and noticed was Libya, and the sign of the Great Sword could have been the terror activities of that time. There is another channel on YouTube here that many years before pointed out that War on Terror seemed to be the first seal opening. So he pointed out the exact same things as me before I even came on the internet saying it. And then he pointed out that the red horse was going to be like Middle Eastern wars. And I was pointing out separately from him before, this was before I even found him. I was pointing out that the ISIS situation was probably the Great Sword that it talked about. And then he pointed out that the third seal would probably have to do, the war part of that would probably have to do with Russia because you're going north. And then the fourth seal would be going south, so that makes me look at Africa. And it would make sense if Africa comes under the pale horse. I've been thinking it would be the US or China, because those are the two big ones against each other right now. That one would fall into pale horse events, and that would be in the cashless going toward an Antichrist worldwide system. But it also makes sense it would be something to do with Africa, because the war over the resources there to build our AI is bigger. I hate to say it's very sad, and part of the pale horse would be things that Africa traditionally struggled with, like famines. But the year 2040 is very interesting here, because we're looking at the 2010s was about ISIS and peace taken, because all of the wars we're seeing today were set up in the past decade. This is why I was looking at the 2020s looked like it was possibly third seal events of cashless and rationing systems, because our food was collapsing and because of the weather changes. And sure enough, you guys see what's happened so far this decade. We're going straight toward cashless and straight toward all the technology that comes with it, toward the image of the beast. And so now we're pointing toward 2030 possibly being a pale horse. And I'm going toward his 2040 time frame in this description, in this explanation. If 2030 is a pale horse that lasts approximately 10 years, and I was really hoping against that for real. But if, and it does look like we would need about that much more time to complete our rationing system worldwide, to get everyone on the systems and agreeing with it before a possible Antichrist system shows up with our fake saviors after hopefully I'm praying against a world war for real. But if 2030 is our pale horse, is our fourth seal opening, then right on schedule, what he's saying, September the 8th of 2040, which would have been a lot like September 11 of 2020 when I was attacked in the spirit. 2040 would bring our fifth seal. We're out of the horsemen now, and the tribulation is here. In the fifth seal, all it describes is the martyrdoms of the tribulation. So if we are in the black horse now, if 2030 is a pale horse, and if 2040 brings us the fifth seal, possibly, or possibly the tribulation began more like in 2033, because I've also been very open to the idea that these events may escalate, because we are like the birth pangs that are increasing. 2033 could begin a tribulation event, and 2040 may be the great cataclysm of the sixth seal that ends the tribulation and begins the days of wrath. But it's just interesting that he saw something in the heavenlies was September the 8th of 2040. And he was looking at a 7-year tribulation ending in the year 2047. If that's true, that would be yet one more 7-year point in our decades with our 7-year time markers. If the tribulation began in the year 2040, just if, it matches how much time it would take for people to be accepting the systems, especially our new generations, to be accepting of these systems enough to go forward, and for people to also be prepared for tribulation more, to realize that we may not be getting raptured when everybody traditionally thought we would in a prosperous economy, in a modern Western culture. It's also interesting to notice that Rob Skiba and Ray Kurzweil, who had developed an AI that could play the piano, these guys were having the discussion of the year 2045 being the year that the man becomes immortal due to the advanced technology. An idea like this was also featured by Time magazine. And so if you're looking at 2040 as a tribulation beginning, then you're looking at 2045 as like the midpoint of, if you go from late 2040 to late 2043 and then into the middle of 2044, that's when you would begin to see the abomination of desolation, or what I call the 2.0, the upgrade of from the first to the second beast system. And that's whenever the image of the beast appears and is given life. So yes, you're looking at something like an extremely advanced AI, like to the maximum that it's going to be allowed. And so they may be onto something there. I mean, I know that's just a figure thrown out there, and things can advance a lot quicker, or even stopped or slowed down for different reasons. But I just found that was also an interesting prediction. So the late 2030s or even 2040 makes a lot more sense of the tribulation beginning then than, say, 2027, because the third seal really has not manifested yet and the pale horse hasn't arrived. And it would kind of like, you need to have a time frame where people can say, yes, that was obviously a white horse rollout. This was obviously a red horse peace taken. That's when the wars obviously began. And then there was an obvious third seal, black horse event of the economies being taken over into a rationing system. And then there was a pale horse in which it occurred over 1/4 of the earth. And I really don't like the idea of things being drug out with all of this, but this just makes a lot more sense than, say, everything beginning 2027 or even 2029, because the levels of changes that would be coming to the world would make a lot more sense there. So no matter which of these dates you're looking at, it's just an understanding that 2,000 years since the Lord came the first time back in Bethlehem, that end of the 2,000 years is coming up very soon, no matter how we look at it or calculate it. And therefore we likely do not have another generation before all of these things come to pass. And the weather with the powers of heaven are shaking, it seems to concur. So that's what I have for you today on the Revelation 12 sign and what people are looking at with those signs every September, of the sign of the Virgin giving the birth to the Son, the life of the world, the salvation of the world, and what these time frames might mean for us and what we're looking at today. I've been deeply impressed in this season that the testimony of the Lord includes the themes of great sacrifice. He made a great sacrifice for us, and those who carried the gospel around him, they made great sacrifices. And that part of the message of the gospel is understanding and appreciating and honoring the great sacrifice. The sacrifices that we're often called to. If you read in the New Testament, it is filled with selflessness and giving and being sacrificial, saying, not my will, but your will. And that's the whole meaning of the cross. When the Lord said to deny yourself, take up your cross and follow him. And that is the message going forward into the difficult times as well. It seems like there is a great challenge in our time in what faith is being defined as, of true sacrifices for the Lord, for his word, for the gospel, versus an idea that faith means our prosperity constantly. It's a pretty big difference, and I believe we're all being tested out in this. And so even those who surrounded the event of the Lord's appearing or witnessed the events, they ended up making great sacrifices one way or the other. And I just think it's important not to glorify suffering in any way, but just to remember, because that is so lost in the modern world, in the modern advertising campaigns. That the whole message of just the truth and the surrender and the Lord and reality is being deliberately removed in our end-time faiths and our end-time denominations. These things have been deliberately eroded and removed. It's the cross, the sacrifice of the cross, the message of the cross. In the end-time doctrines, in the end-time faiths, the way it has been deliberately groomed and coached and brought into the world, the ideas of faith have been twisted. And people have even written books about Christianity without the cross, and they're picking on like one or two denominations, and that's a very important and good book. But I've noticed that all these denominations have tried to remove the cross. In the Bible versions and the music, they're removing the great faith and patience of the saints, and they're removing the true message, the true gospel message everywhere. So please keep that in mind, and you can have your own Bible studies and pray and draw close to the Lord wherever you are. That would be my encouragement in these times where the faith has been seriously eroded. I'm so grateful for what He's done for us and continues to do for us. This year, I hope you have a very blessed Christmas season.